You are now listening to Thecrackednation on KOCC, Eagle Broadcasting. I'm Caleb Henry. I'm here with Tyler Robbins. If you want to tweet in, feel free at @TheCrazy and @Cracked_Nation. And we are going to be talking our favorite movies of all time today. Mostly our top 10 favorite. At least that's what I've got. But before we get started, I just heard some very sad news that
really,
Roger Ebert...
I mean, this affects the film world as much as probably
just
anything.
Yeah. Probably the greatest film critic of all time, Roger Ebert, passed away from cancer, which he's been battling
for years.
A long time. This is huge because, he's the only critic that I consistently agree with on him. Consistently meaning more than anybody else on his reviews, and he is the way he writes his reviews is unlike anybody I've ever heard. And I've gone through his list of great movies, all-time great movies, and he has so many films on there that you'd never imagine would be on there, and until you watch them, you're like, wow, this is such a low-budget indie film. But he can see things in movies that nobody else could.
Yeah.
And the show that he did with Roper was one of the first, televised movie reviews and stuff like that. So that truly is a sad day in the film world. Where I was hoping it was an April Fool's joke that a couple days late, but
that would be a
not.
really sick April Fool's joke
that
too.
That would be.
I mean, it's one thing YouTube said that they were going to shut down. They're no longer going to accept new entries on April Fools, stuff like that. But really, saying that someone's died, that's really kind of
but
crossing the line.
Unfortunately, it was not an April Fool's joke, and he is no longer with us. So yes, there's that. And today is also, I just checked a little bit ago, Heath Ledger's birthday.
Oh,
one of the greatest acting performances of all time.
Yeah.
We really only remember him for his role in The Dark Knight as the Joker.
Two things.
Yeah.
that and Brokeback Mountain.
And Brokeback Mountain.
Which is another outstanding acting performance, but really eclipsed. Eclipsed everything in the film world with his acting performance as the Joker, and then his death before the movie was released.
So now we get to have Ebert's day of death on the same day that Heath Ledger was born. So, kind of a little symbolic there.
Yeah.
Anyways, we're going to move on. We're going to go through our top 10 favorite movies of all time. This isn't best by any means. These are at least for me, my top 10, I could watch these over and over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Never get bored of watching it. Or they mean something to me personally.
Yeah. And watchability for me really factored into the way that I have gone about planning this list. Mm-hmm. But it's not only that, quality factors into an extent, and I feel like it should for any true cinemaphile.
Yeah.
When you are watching a movie, there are exceptions. You'll see them in my list. I'm sure they'll see some in yours. But generally speaking, you're more likely to like a movie that's really well done than a movie that's kind of, just put together on the fly.
Mm-hmm. And there's only one on my list that I would consider not a quality movie.
Right.
But all the other 9 are. So I'm going to go ahead and start off. I'm going to do number 10, 9, 8, and then we'll kind of do it in about 2 or 3 at a time.
Okay.
So my number 10 favorite movie of all time is The Princess Bride.
Okay.
Princess Bride was one of the probably one of the first movies I can really remember watching. And at first I was like, this movie's going to be dumb. Just listen to the name, and you think it's going to be this big love story called The Princess Bride. But it had nothing to do with that. It was all about... It was a love story, but it wasn't really a love story, if you know what I mean. So, and somebody's calling me. I need to turn off my phone next time. So, Princess Bride, I can still watch that movie over and over and over again, and the quotes in that movie are just untouchable. There are so many quotes in that movie.
Yeah.
That maybe Star Wars is the only other one that you can quote more.
Yeah.
So, truly love The Princess Bride, especially Vincini. He's my favorite character.
Yes. Oh, yes.
In all of it. So, gotta love the movie. And a lot of people, I'm sure, have that movie in their top 10 favorite movies of all time.
Right.
Now, at number 9, this one's a little different because some people would be like, really, this one, not the other one? Because you'll know what I mean. And that is The Patriot with Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
I prefer The Patriot to Braveheart. So Braveheart is not on my list.
That's surprising to me.
Now, quality of movie, Braveheart, for sure.
Yeah.
But for enjoyability, I watched The Patriot first. And it was kind of like Casino Goodfellas. You know, which one did you see first is the one you're going to like more, I think. Mm-hmm. And because I saw The Patriot first, and it was the first Mel Gibson movie I ever saw, it was like, whoa, this is awesome. And I prefer movies about that time period. Like, I truly love movies about, like, the Revolutionary War and stuff.
Yeah.
Because there aren't that many good ones. And so when they do, and it kind of brought this, like, medieval feel to it. Because, you know, he's running around with a hatchet half the time. And, like, the whole movie was just awesome. And I loved the story and everything about it. So The Patriot is at my number 9 favorite movie of all time. I'll do one more, and then you can take it from there.
All right.
My number 8, and again, a lot of people might be like, really? This is in your top 10? Number 8, I have The Hurt Locker, the movie by Catherine Bigelow that won Best Picture in 2008. It's my favorite war movie of all time, when you, like, modern war at least.
Right.
And I don't know what it was about this movie. I think it was because my expectations were so low when I watched it that it was, like, shocking how much I liked it. And I was like, oh my God, this is really good. And every time I watch it since then, I like it more and more.
Yeah.
And it just builds on me. And it's something about the way she filmed it, the suspense that she built without any sound and without any action. They were just sitting there sniping a guy in a building for, like, 10 minutes and nothing happens. And you're just, like, completely on the edge of your seat.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know what it was about that movie.
I mean, that's a movie, and it's on my list somewhere too. We'll cover that. Mm-hmm. It's actually, we'll cover it here pretty quickly because it's another one of the places kind of on the lower half of my list.
Right.
But you got to understand, it's a really tough cut. So, I mean, the fact that it's low on my list means nothing about the quality of the movie or the, really how likable it is. Because the list that we've put together, I mean, it's this way with mine. I would assume it's this way with yours. It fluctuates.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
What my number one movie is today might not be my number one movie a month from now.
Now, for me, my top 5 have not fluctuated in, like, 3 years. But other than those 5, it does. Those other 5 just change out all the time.
Yeah.
So this is what it is when I decide to put it together for this list.
Yeah. And it's tougher to put together the lower end of a list like this because you're like, okay, I know these movies at the very top, what they mean to me personally. Mm-hmm. And I can weigh that.
Exactly.
But really for me, I would say it's probably 1, 2, 3 for me that they fluctuate some, but they always have stayed top 3 or ever since I've seen them.
Right.
And, I mean, I don't think it would be an exaggeration to say that I've seen over 100 movies in my lifetime.
Over 100?
Over 100 lifetime, yes.
Oh, you've seen way more than that.
Probably.
My IMDb list has over 500 and some.
Okay. I mean,
so you've definitely seen...
I've never listed it out, but...
Oh, you'd be surprised. You've seen hundreds of movies.
I'm sure I have. But out of all of those movies, there are 3 that really... And one of them would probably not make anyone's top 10 best list, but it would, constantly be there in my favorite list. And so it's movies that, mean something to you personally. Mm-hmm. And...
So go ahead and give us your number 10.
Okay.
Because so number 10 for me was Princess Bride. Number 9 was The Patriot. Number 8 was The Hurt Locker.
Okay.
And so now, Tyler.
My number 10, picking up right where your number 8 left off, is The Hurt Locker.
Okay. Perfect.
And what you were saying about how slow the movie is, and it really is a slow movie in terms of development, but it doesn't feel like it. When you're watching the movie, especially the first time, but, I mean, again, watchability factors into this list for me, and this is a movie that I can watch several times. I could watch it 2 or 3 times in a month, and I would not get tired of it. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
But, on paper, you should, because it's such a slow-moving movie. It really progresses very slowly in the plot, but, I mean, you're watching it, and it just captivates you. I mean, you are in this movie, and you can feel yourself, there in the sands of Iraq, and you can, you feel invested in the story.
And one thing that she did is they actually went there to shoot the film, which I love about Catherine Bigelow. She goes to location to shoot. She doesn't recreate her location in the U.S. Like, she went to the Middle East to film. And then also, what I think I like so much about the movie is just that it's so technical that every little aspect of it is perfect.
Yeah.
There's not one little glitch in it that I don't like.
Right.
And also the fact there are a lot of people that don't like this movie. This is probably the number one on my list that like has a love-hate relationship with people.
Yeah.
Like half the people just truly love it, half the people just can't stand it.
And any time that you make a movie like this, I feel like it's going to be polarizing just by its nature. I mean, I wouldn't say it's really political because it really doesn't get into that as much.
I thought it was going to be really political when I first watched it, and it was actually not.
Yeah, but just the way that it's shot, I mean, if you're just the average Joe Q moviegoer and you're expecting, something where it's action, if you're expecting Black Hawk Down, you're going to be sorely disappointed.
Right,
but
exactly.
It really moves slowly. It progresses slowly. On paper, it should not be as good as it is, almost, I feel like.
Yep.
Or at least not as watchable. But it's extremely watchable. I love the movie. I definitely feel that it deserved winning Best Picture, which it did. And it makes the number 10 cut on my list, which should tell you something about the list and,
exactly. And
how quality these movies are.
Another thing about The Hurt Locker that a lot of people overlook, if you look at the way that the camera is operated,
The cinematography of it.
The cinematography is just stunning. So I challenge you, if you ever watch Hurt Locker, pay attention to the way that she moves the camera around. It is shocking.
Oh, man, yeah.
Okay, your number 9.
Absolutely. My number 9 is actually the only war movie. Let me screen through here quick. Yeah, my number 9 is the only war movie on here ahead of Hurt Locker.
Okay.
And critically speaking, I feel like a lot of people would have it there. I debated whether or not to have this on my list. I decided that it had to be there. Even though I've only seen it one time, I watched the Redux version of it, and it's Apocalypse Now.
Right. Well,
I watched the 4-hour Redux of it. Only seen it one time. And most of these movies...
that's one of the few that you're going to be like, the rewatchability, you don't know about it yet because you haven't rewatched it.
Right. But just on first impression, and I feel like, full disclosure, I have only seen it one time, but it's another slow-moving movie that absolutely held me glued to the screen for 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
Not many movies can do that. On my whole list, there's only one other movie like that, and we'll get to that later. But number 9, Apocalypse Now, so many big actors in this that you don't really realize until you start looking. I mean, I had no idea that Robert Duvall was Kilgore.
Right.
And then I did some looking and found it, and I was like, that's unbelievable. He's not even really that big of a part in the movie.
Really?
I mean,
I haven't seen it.
You haven't
actually.
seen it. He's probably on screen for 20 minutes.
Really?
Robert Duvall. In
Okay.
the peak of his career. I mean, this is during the Godfather years.
Like just after The Godfather.
Right, yeah. In 1979. It would be after, just a few years after number 2. Because did number 2 come out in 74?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there was Network, which came out shortly after that, which he was huge in. Extremely profane. That was new for me. Seeing Robert Duvall as a really blue character.
Right.
But yeah, the quality of the casting here, the quality of cinematography, which cinematography on this is just something that I don't want to beat a dead horse, and most of these movies are going to have great cinematography, but on this one, I really feel like it needs to be brought up. Apocalypse Now has some of the best cinematography of any movie I've ever seen.
Really?
Absolutely. And just, you'll know this from watching the first 5 minutes of the movie. You watch the first 5 minutes, you're like, okay, the camera work here is unbelievable, and it never loses any quality.
Right.
I mean,
that's what
it gets better.
Coppola does really well. I mean, the first 2 Godfather movies were over 3 hours long each.
Yeah.
And he held your attention the whole time, and the quality never dipped.
Yep.
And he did it again for Apocalypse Now, for sure.
Yeah. Coppola is one of those guys, he's had some movies that have been kind of questionable as far as, just how overall quality. But it's like a hit or miss thing. He's got some movies that, are kind of forgettable, but he's also got 3 of the top 20 movies of all time. And
right.
So
for sure.
Yeah. Coppola does a great job here. Everyone does a great job. Like I said, casting, I can't say enough about it in this movie. There's only 1, maybe 2 movies on my list that I would say have better casting than this.
Okay.
So that's my number 9. Number 8, The Green Mile.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
With Tom Hanks and Samuel Clark Duncan, rest in peace, died recently. We've been talking about a lot of death on this show. It's
We really
kind of
have.
morbid, but I mean Roger Ebert,
Yeah, well,
the father of film criticism.
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, The Green Mile with Tom Hanks, it's a very quality movie. It was nominated for Best Picture the year it came out, but it's not overwhelming quality. I mean, it's not something where you watch it and you're going to say, "Oh my gosh, that's automatic Academy Award."
Right.
But it emotionally tugs on you.
It's one of the most emotional movies I've ever seen.
Yeah,
It's up there.
There are a few movies that I can watch where just it doesn't matter if I've seen it 15 times. I consistently get teared up when I watch it. And I mean, I'm an emotional person. I enjoy watching movies that bring out that emotion in me because that's a sign of really good acting and good direction, good screenplay. And Green Mile does that unlike any other movie on this list for me.
Yeah.
I mean, just watching it consistently, I get choked up at the end. The acting throughout is great. The plot is, originally was a Stephen King book, and Stephen King, some of his movies don't translate that well to this, or some of his books don't translate that well to the screen.
The Mist.
Yeah, we've seen some that were absolutely horrible adaptations.
Right.
But Green Mile is not one of them. I would argue maybe his best.
Book to screen?
Yeah, it's definitely up there.
I can't think I don't know many of his novels, but
Yeah.
from what I can think of, that is definitely his best.
Yeah,
And that movie...
there's only one more that I would say is definitely ahead of it, and that is Shawshank Redemption.
He wrote Shawshank also?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
Okay, well, I was about to say that Green Mile gets overlooked as a movie because of Shawshank.
Really?
It was the same director, then you said same writer, or King
Or
wrote both
original
novels.
yeah.
So it's kind of like lots of times they're compared, and everybody always considers Shawshank the better of the two.
Right.
And I think technically it is better than Green Mile,
Yeah.
but Green Mile kind of gets pushed to the side because of Shawshank,
Yeah, and
it doesn't quite get the credit it deserves.
And for me personally, Shawshank Redemption is not on my list. Spoiler.
Yeah,
I'll
it's
just
not
go
on
ahead
mine
and say
either.
that.
I'll say
but
that too.
It's right on the cusp of being on there. And I mean, it's one of those movies where, like I said, these lists are very subjective and they shift around, sometimes from month to month. It depends on the mood you're in. And Shawshank Redemption is definitely one of those movies that would rotate in and out of being on the edge of my top 10 list, most favorite movies.
Right. See, it wouldn't even get close to my favorite list.
Really?
No. I mean, I like the movie, and I totally respect it, but I just don't really enjoy watching it. I don't know why. I think it might be because it's number one on IMDb, so everybody's like, it's the greatest movie ever made. And it's not.
Yeah.
It's not even close to the greatest movie ever made, but yet, I don't know. I think I just went in bitter about it, and I haven't gotten over that yet. Maybe that's a personal thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I saw it, I had no idea it was number one on IMDb. I saw it for the first time probably 2 years ago, so not an extremely long time ago.
Right.
But when I watched it, and we'll get back on topic here in a minute because this is talking about a movie that's not on the list.
Right.
But I knew it was very highly respected critically, and I also knew that it was very popular. And I was like, this is a movie that, I've always heard about, never gotten to see, watched it. And maybe because I saw it so late, that's part of the reason it doesn't factor into my list. But I love the movie.
And I totally understand why people like it.
Yeah.
Totally.
If we were doing this list, 6 months from now, there's a very good chance it cracks my top 10. I mean, these things cycle with me.
There's a personal thing against it. The fact that it's above The Godfather, it just rubs me wrong. But
it's nowhere near Godfather in quality. But in terms of likability, you've got to understand why it's above The Godfather.
Oh yeah, in terms of general audience.
Yeah. Okay. So
we'll
let's hear your number 7.
My number 7. I'm going to do 7, 6, and you can do 7, 6, and then we'll go to our break.
Can we go through the break?
Maybe. Sure. I don't care.
Let's go through the break, man.
Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead and do my number 7.
Okay.
Now this is the one movie on my whole list that nobody in the world would have on their top 100 greatest movies ever.
Well, let's hear it. Shock me.
Equilibrium.
Really?
You've not seen it.
I have
but
not.
I've talked about it a lot.
Yeah.
And this, from what I can remember, is the first R-rated movie that I got permission to watch. So this was kind of like, a big deal. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, you get to watch this movie with your cousin and everything. And I watched it, and I was blown away by how awesome the action scenes were in this movie. This is one that relies completely on action, and there's some real cheesy stuff in it. The plot kind of drags in the middle, but the few scenes that Christian Bale is like shooting people is like fantastic.
Yeah.
And they say it's kind of like a Matrix ripoff. It kind of is, but it's a lot different because you're not dreaming. It's all like real people.
Yeah.
And something about the scene, and it was in my top 10 fight scenes of all time, is the hallway scene at the end where the scene's called Not Without Incident. And that scene alone is worth watching the whole movie for. Just for that last scene in the movie, it's totally worth watching the whole movie.
Okay.
Because it's such an awesome, it's kind of a revenge story, but it's so much fun to watch. I can always put it in and watch it. Never bored. And it's, for an R-rated movie, it's really clean.
Yeah.
Really, the only reason it's rated R is for violence. And even then, it's not the worst violence I've ever seen. I mean, it's not like bloody.
Right,
at all.
yeah.
So I highly recommend watching Equilibrium. I can't really say too much about it. I mean, it's not that great of a movie. I just truly love it. So my number 6 is the first Christopher Nolan movie on my list here, The Prestige. Now, The Prestige, I think, doesn't get enough credit either.
Yeah.
Because of Nolan's other stuff.
Right.
And so when I watched The Prestige, I had not seen The Illusionist yet. It's another one of those. Whichever one you see first, you're probably going to like more.
Yeah.
I personally don't like The Illusionist that much, but I love The Prestige. And when The Prestige came at the end, see what I did there?
Yeah.
At the end of the movie, when, I'm not going to spoil anything for anybody, but when you know what exactly happens in the whole story, you're like, oh my goodness, I was blown away. One of the best endings to a movie ever is at the end of this movie. So The Prestige is definitely on my, actually today, I switched it from number 5 to number 6. So it was my top 5 for the longest time until I got on here today. I was looking, what should I put at number 5? And I was like, can't do it. I had to put it to number 6. So number 7 is Equilibrium. Number 6 for me is The Prestige. Let's see what you got at number 7 and 6.
Okay. Number 7, the movie that I've begged you to watch, and I don't think you've gotten to it yet.
Probably not.
Scent of a Woman.
I have not gotten to it yet. Sorry.
I'm
so sorry.
For my money, Al Pacino's best ever acting performance ever. The only movie that he's ever won an Academy Award for Best Actor for.
Right.
And to me, that's stunning because there are other movies I think he would have deserved it in that given year. But if you're judging Pacino against himself, this movie is it. I mean, It's not even close in my mind to the Godfather movies. Because the Godfather movies have a lot of other casting that they can really lean on. It's not just Pacino. I mean, they've got Duvall, and they've got in the second one, they got Brando. In the second one, they've got De Niro. In this one, in Scent of a Woman, they don't really have an all-star cast. It's Pacino and a bunch of people that you haven't really heard of, and in a way that almost makes it better, because there are certain actors that can handle being a vehicle for a movie,
right?
Or the movie being a vehicle for them, rather.
Daniel Day-Lewis
can do it. Al Pacino can do it, as proven by this movie.
Right.
I mean, the movie is all about him and his character. I mean, there's a subplot going on with a kid that stays with him and is a student, and it becomes compelling, but it's primarily compelling because of the way that Pacino interacts with him.
I see.
And really, the catalyst for this movie being extremely watchable and extremely lovable is Pacino's character. He plays a guy named Colonel Frank Slade, and at first you just absolutely hate him. I mean, the guy's a jerk. I'm not going to spoil the movie for you, but over the course of the movie, you get to the point where you just almost intimately know this character.
Right.
And really, another emotional film. I don't think I ever cried watching this movie. It's not that kind of emotion. But it's the kind of movie where there's a point at the end, and I'm not going to spoil it for our listeners or for you, but you need to get on. You need to get on seeing this.
I will. I just don't have it, and it's one of those being at school here.
Right.
It's hard to get a movie to watch, so it's not on Netflix.
Yeah. Well, I can sympathize with that, but you need to make it a priority.
Yeah, I haven't really made it a priority.
If any of our listeners haven't seen it, they need to make it a priority to to it as well, because this is an outstanding movie. This is every reason why you love Al Pacino as an actor written up in this movie.
Okay.
And not only that, the screenplay in general is very good. I mean, all the other actors are people that you haven't really heard of, but they do a very good performance, and their lines are extremely well written.
Right.
I mean, the movie has almost become an archetype. And, it's cool in a way, but it's almost sad in a way, because you see this movie and the brilliance that it brought. Mm-hmm. And there may have been a movie before it that inspired a lot of it. But to my knowledge, there's not.
Okay.
But you kind of see this kid that he's from a really stuffy boarding house or boarding school, and everyone there goes to Yale or Harvard or Princeton, and he's this poor kid that he's got in only because he has amazing grades and no family connections whatsoever.
Right.
And kind of the friendship that is forged with Pacino and with his character over a long process. I mean, it's a 2.5-hour movie, and that's another thing that factors into it. It doesn't feel like you're watching a 2.5-hour movie.
Right.
I mean, you're watching this movie, and you realize at the end of it how much time has passed since you turned it on. But in the beginning, you don't really understand, man, this is a long movie, and you're watching it, and I watched it having no idea how long it was. Like, I'd never seen a minute count.
Right.
And when I got done, I was like, no way that was that long. That was like a 90-minute movie, surely. And it's closer to 150.
Yeah.
So that's a testament to it. Great movie. I'm going to move on to number 6, The Dead Poets Society.
That's another one I've not seen.
Okay.
And that one truly is on my, I really, really want to see it.
Both of them should be. I mean, honestly, if we're being honest here, Caleb, get your stuff together, man.
I know.
I mean, both of these movies are just outstanding movies. Both nominated for Best Picture. Neither of them won, but Dead Poets Society stars Robin Williams,
right.
And he's starring across from the guy that is in House. The series House.
Yeah.
The guy that is kind of the foil to Hugh Laurie's character. I can never remember his name.
I don't know, actually. Not a clue.
But
Dead Poets Society is consistently considered Robin Williams' best acting performance.
Right.
Which is saying a lot, because he won the Oscar for Good Will Hunting.
Right, and should have won it here.
And a lot of people are like, how did he not win?
Wilson. James Wilson. Robert Sean Leonard is the name of the actor.
Oh, okay.
He's in this movie when he's like 16 years old. And really, he does a good job, but Robin Williams absolutely steals the show.
Right.
And the final scene in it is one of the most iconic scenes that's ever been done in film. I mean, I've seen it parodied so many times on shows like Family Guy and South Park, things like that. And the movie is quality, but it's not so much quality for just great cinematography or great directing or production. It's quality because it's a brilliant screenplay, and the characters involved really make you care about them.
Right.
I mean, technically speaking, this is not an extremely well-done movie, but it's got a great script, and it's got the people that are needed to pull off that script.
I gotcha.
And this is another movie that I've only seen, I think, twice. So I haven't seen it as many as a lot of the movies that are coming up on my list.
Right.
But it's one of those movies that this is another one. If you don't get emotional at some point in this movie watching it, there's something wrong with you, quite honestly.
I got you.
You've got a heart of stone or something.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie is so moving, and not even necessarily in the cry your eyes out type thing. You know, everyone, the first time they watch Titanic, they get teared up at the end, except for maybe you, because you've got this
debatable
vendetta against Titanic, but that's for another show.
I'm not the only one. There is a huge chunk of people that despise Titanic.
So you're going to tell me about the big underground Titanic hating club now?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, we'll discuss this some other time.
Yeah.
But
I hope that's not in your top 5.
No.
Okay. Good.
No, it's not. Although I did actually consider it. If I was doing a top 25, it would probably be in there.
I could see that.
But yeah, number 6, Dead Poets Society. Robin Williams hits the ball out of the park.
Okay.
And that, if you take away one thing from that movie, that's it.
Right.
So give me your 5, 4, 3.
Well, I'm going to go recap real quick.
Okay.
right now, if you're listening in, this is the Thecrackednation on KOCC Eagle Broadcasting. We have been talking our top 10 favorite movies of all time. And my number 10 through 6 were The Princess Bride at number 10, The Patriot at number 9, The Hurt Locker at number 8, Equilibrium at number 7, and The Prestige at number 6. And what were your 5 that we've gone through already?
I've gone through number 10, The Hurt Locker, number 9, Apocalypse Now, number 8, Green Mile, number 7, Scent of a Woman, and number 6, Dead Poets Society.
Okay. And now I'm going to go through 5, 4, 3.
All right.
And then Tyler will go through his 5, 4, 3, then we'll do 2, 2, 1, 1.
Okay.
Now, number 5 is the movie that got me into the major that I'm at school here. Like, into film. Like, this is the movie that, without this movie, I don't know if I'd be here doing this radio show.
And if you're a faithful listener on the show, you don't know what's coming.
Yeah. Taxi Driver.
Yep.
With Robert De Niro. Directed by Martin Scorsese. Scorsese is my favorite director of all time, mainly because of this one movie, but also because of another one that's up on my list a little higher.
Okay.
Taxi Driver. What do we say about Taxi Driver? It's in my... If I made a list of 10 greatest movies ever made, I would probably put Taxi Driver in there.
Yeah, and if you made a movie of top 10 movies that were ahead of their time,
Right.
Taxi Driver would be probably top 3.
The fact that it didn't win Best Picture kind of shows that it was ahead of its time. Because looking back, Rocky.
If that came out in 2013 and was up to date film techniques and such, but same cinematography, same acting, same script, it would, if not win Best Picture, it would at least be a heavy favorite to contend for it.
Right. And then back in the day back in 76 when it came out, Rocky won Best Picture. And I'm sure at the time, and even now, Rocky's a good movie.
It's a great movie.
It's a great movie. But when you're talking like all the aspects of film, it doesn't even compare to Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
I mean, just the acting alone. How did De Niro not win Best Actor?
See, that's the one that's more surprising to me. I'm not as surprised that Taxi Driver didn't win Best Picture.
Right.
But just given how forward-thinking it was in the direction that it decided to go. Mm-hmm. But I am stunned that he did not win Best Lead Actor.
Especially he just came off Best Supporting Actor in 74 for Godfather Part 2, De Niro did.
Yeah.
In 76, you're like, oh, he could win Best Actor. Doesn't win. And then in 80, he won for Raging Bull. He should have had 3 Oscars in a 6-year stretch.
Yeah.
And it's sad that he didn't, honestly. I don't remember who did win, but something about Taxi Driver, and the first time I saw it, I hated it. This is what's weird. Okay, the first time I saw it, I was like, why is this movie praised? Like, I don't like it at all. Then my friend Mark, who I've mentioned many times, got me interested in film. He said, okay, I'm going to go over why it was good. And he started listing all these things. And that was the first time that I can remember going, oh, there's a lot more to film than just what you see.
Yeah.
Like, how the camera moved. And like, there's that one scene where he's talking on the cell phone, or not the cell phone, the payphone, and the camera, like, moves to the side and shows this hallway. And it's just sitting there on the hallway. And I was like, why is that not showing De Niro acting? But it has something to do with what he's thinking at the time. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh my goodness, and all that kind of stuff. And then just what Scorsese did with that movie is it drew me in. And that's one of the few movies that I will just like, I could sit down and watch it over and over again.
Right.
I mean, and every time I would just soak in more in the soundtrack. So good.
Yeah.
And everything about it. So definitely for me, Taxi Driver. And this is the one, it was at number 6 behind The Prestige. But then I was like, I have to put it in my top 5.
Yeah.
Has to.
Yeah. And this is another movie where, kind of like Scent of a Woman with Pacino, De Niro carried this movie.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you had an actor that was subpar and everything else stayed the same, cinematography, the lines, everything, if you had an actor that was subpar or really even a good actor that wasn't De Niro, this movie is not a great movie.
Yeah, he was this movie. I mean, he and Scorsese, it's hard to say that because Scorsese did so much for it.
Well, yeah.
But De Niro and Scorsese, they had to have both of them together at the same time.
Right.
Or this movie is not as good.
Absolutely.
And then also how sketch it was for the 70s. Like,
well,
I think why it didn't get so much praise is it was a pretty with the whole prostitute stuff and drugs and all that.
It portrayed New York as it was in the 1970s. We're too young to remember this, but I've heard from people that are older than us, New York used to be a lot sketchier than it is now, and it's because of until really the 90s even, crime there was just rampant. I mean, there was so much corruption. People didn't really care to do anything to try and push it the other way.
Right.
And, that didn't really change. Rudy Giuliani, when he was mayor there, really made a concerted effort to crack down on crime. That's really when things started getting a lot better. But, in the 1970s, he's not really pushing the limits so much as just not covering anything up.
Right. And I think that's what a lot of people maybe at the time didn't like about it.
Yeah.
Because they're like, ooh, this shows way too much of what New York's really like.
Yeah.
So I have Taxi Driver at number 5. Most influential movie in my career life. Not my personal life, probably. But when it comes to, like, where my life is going, Taxi Driver.
All right.
Very influential.
All right.
Okay. Number 4 is the Russell Crowe masterpiece, Gladiator.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
It's really tough for me to put it above Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have the same influence on me.
Right.
But I don't know. Something about the story of that movie, I think gets overlooked because of, it's Gladiator and it's Russell Crowe and he's killing people. And,
right.
That's all cool and all in the movie setting. But the story is so good.
Oh, absolutely.
And how he sticks up for his honor and everything, and, like, how corrupt the Caesar is, and like all that. Just truly love Gladiator, and it's one of my mom's favorite movies. It's probably in her top 5 favorite movies.
Wow.
But of course she fast forwards all the violent scenes, but she still loves the movie. She'll put it in to watch it, or she'll call us and be like, hey, can you go borrow Gladiator from your friend? And I'm like, okay, and I go get it and we watch it.
Yeah.
Like, we're never the ones that say, hey, you want to watch Gladiator, Mom? She's always the one that says, hey, let's watch Gladiator.
Yeah. And that shows you something about the generational abilities of a movie like that to be relevant to not only 18-year-olds. I'm not going to say 13-year-olds because I don't think that people that young should be watching a movie that's this violent.
Right.
And I mean, it's extremely violent. But this movie resonates with 18-year-olds and with 80-year-olds.
Yeah.
And with everything in between. I mean, this is a movie that it's just one of those movies that whatever your age is, and really whatever your level of film, technical knowledge is, you're going to like this movie.
Yeah, and this is one that Ebert, who we've talked about a few times already, he did not like this movie. He gave it a bad rating.
Really?
Yeah, like he said that, I'm going to actually read the review, or the quick synopsis that he gave, because it shocked me, because I figured that he would have liked this kind of movie. He gave it a 50 out of 100. And he said, it employs depression as a substitute for personality and believes that the characters are bitter and morose enough, we won't notice how dull they are.
Wow.
And I was like, really?
That's
like
harsh.
That was one of the few reviews that he did that I completely disagreed with.
Now, see, I see where he's coming from here.
Right.
And honestly, I feel like the movie is way overrated.
Really?
I do.
In a sense of quality, I do believe it's a little overrated.
Okay. My thing is, I watch it and I'm like, this is everything that an epic movie should be at a score of 7 out of 10. I mean, it's not awful in any area.
Right.
But I don't see many areas where it's great either. I mean, the story is definitely its strong suit.
Yeah.
The story, and there are some slow parts in the movie, but any really great movie, it's going to have some points where it's not just nonstop action. I mean, that's just something that you've got to understand in the film world. But this movie, I feel like, in all the places where an epic movie, it's a historical period piece of this type, it's a 7, where Braveheart for me is a 10.
Right.
I mean, I feel like it's good in all these areas, but it's not great. And so I'm kind of surprised that you have it on the list and not Braveheart. But,
well,
I mean, that's a personal choice.
Right. And for personal enjoyment, I like it. Braveheart's just such an investment to watch.
It is.
And again, I don't, like, that's the same reason Saving Private Ryan isn't on my list here, is movies that are such an investment to watch that I don't enjoy them as much as other movies. Now, I respect them and love them. Don't get me wrong. But, like, The Godfather. Godfather didn't make my list either, which kind of shocked you. But it's an investment to watch. And in terms of, like, when it comes to Braveheart and Gladiator, like, Gladiator, I could turn it on and watch it and do homework at the same time, probably. And just, like, enjoy watching it. Braveheart, I turn it on, I'm completely watching the movie.
Yeah.
And, like, I wouldn't want to watch it again a month later.
Yeah,
Like,
because in Braveheart, there are so many really technical, political aspects that you can't catch unless you're really tuned into the movie.
exactly.
I mean, the action stuff, yeah, everyone enjoys that. But the subtle kind of political, I don't want to say subtle because, I mean, this is half of the movie, but the political messages and the goings-on behind the scenes, behind all of the painting people blue and running through the foothills of Scotland, slicing people to shreds with swords. The way that the movie moves is politically, not in terms of action. And you have to be keyed in 100% to really pick up on that.
And both these movies, honestly, on my list here, probably both these movies, Braveheart and Gladiator, which Braveheart's not even on my list, probably have the best story out of any of these. Like, when it comes to, like, quality, not just, like, that's not the right term. Like, in terms of redeeming story and a story that, like, people need to see. Like, this is a good story, not just a good story as in, like, some of the other movies I'm going to mention in a second.
Right.
But as in terms of, like, Christians should watch these movies because of the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's one thing also why I loved Gladiator, is it didn't just rely on the violence, it relied on the story.
Yeah.
To propel it through.
Definitely.
Okay. So number 3 is the other Martin Scorsese movie I have on here, The Departed.
Okay.
The Departed is the first Martin Scorsese movie I ever saw. And, oh my goodness, I was blown away when I saw this movie.
Yeah.
All right, it was unbelievable.
Let me tell you real quick. It's your list. I'm not going to hijack it for more than a second here. Let me tell you about my reaction when I watched this movie. You were the one that told me, you have to see this movie. You have to watch The Departed. Right. And so finally I gave in. I watched it. And I was thinking through 2.5 hours of the movie, this is overrated. I'm not that big of a fan of this movie. The last 5 minutes of the movie, and I'm not going to spoil anything, the last 5 minutes of this movie took me on this movie on a rating scale of 1 to 10, probably from a 7 to a 9.5. Yep. It's not on my list here, but it's one of those movies that got serious consideration. Yeah. And again, this is another movie that I have only seen once. So if I watched it, if I rewatched it, there's a very good chance that it would push some of these lower numbers out. Right. Because, I mean, I feel like it's a movie that you really have to rewatch.
Oh yeah, I've seen it 5 or 6 times. I own 2 copies of it on Blu-ray. I own the Steelbook and the collector's, or another edition.
Now, what is it about The Departed that really hooks you in?
And, well, one, Scorsese is my favorite director.
Right.
So there's that. And I love his style. The acting by Leonardo DiCaprio, something about it just stuns me. Yeah. Every time I watch it. I'm like, how did he not get considered for an Oscar here?
Best performance by Leo DiCaprio?
I would put it at his number 1 performance, yes. That one and then Blood Diamond, which came out the same year.
And he was nominated for that one.
He was. But I think the acting in this, and then something about the complexity of the story is just, like, shocking. Now, it is a remake, which I didn't know when I first watched it.
Right.
The original is called Eternal Affairs. But when I watched The Departed, I watched it, I was like, it is borderline dorky. It's kind of like a Tarantino movie where it's almost really cheesy. The way that they're talking and yelling, and, like, Alec Baldwin's character in the movie. Yeah. Like, this guy's cheese, and Mark Wahlberg, like, he's a really cheesy character. And yet, they're not. They fit it perfectly. I think it was how well he made it borderline cheese, but yet made it Oscar-worthy. This is his only Oscar win.
Right. And that's something that, as a director, I feel like, and anytime that you're directing or producing a movie, you've got to really flirt with kind of that edge. Because if you make it too serious, you're going to lose a lot of your audience that can't key in for, like, in terms of the popularity of the movie. Right. Not the quality, but the popularity. You have to kind of walk that line between not being too serious and not making it a cheese fest. Because if you make it a cheese fest, and I say that, the next movie on my list is pretty cheesy. But, right. You want to walk that line so as to please both critics and the general population. Right. And he did this with this movie, I would say, better than any of his movies save for one. I think he did it better in Goodfellas. Yes. Because Goodfellas, I feel like, is more watchable than The Departed, in my personal opinion. But, yeah, great production by him. One of his best movies. Yeah, I mean,
it's really hard. I went through the other day and was doing a best of Scorsese's list. Yeah. It is impossible to put it in the like above number 5.
Right.
But yet it's impossible to put it below number 3. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It has to be in the top 3, but yet it's not. And
Yeah.
it's so, yeah. Love The Departed.
Well, this is going to be the movie that he's remembered for that decade.
Yeah.
The decade of the 2000s. People, years and years from now, after Scorsese's long gone, and we're considering his movies classics instead of just really great movies, this will be the movie that defines the decade for him.
Right. This decade, yes. For sure.
Well, the last decade.
Well, that is true. It did come out in the last decade.
Right.
Well, yeah. So The Departed is at my number 3 spot.
Right.
Let's hear what you got from 5 to 3.
Okay. Number 5, I've got The Princess Bride.
Okay.
And like I said, it's a cheese fest, but it's a much beloved cheese fest. And
it's a critically acclaimed cheese fest, too.
Yeah.
Kind of like Monty Python.
Yeah. I mean, this is a movie... I mean, I would argue even more than Monty Python. This is a movie that really... There's so many stereotypes in this movie, but the way that it kind of offsets them with just something that's a little bit different, or the way that it's just a little bit offbeat in the way that the story is written, and the casting... I mean, casting whoever does Vincini, I'm not sure of the actor's name, alongside Andre the Giant... That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, I just from that alone, and then all the different story arcs that pull together.
Wallace Shawn.
Wallace Shawn
Was
is Vincini.
Yep.
Okay. And is he still living?
I believe he is.
Okay.
Yeah, he's still alive.
Okay. That's like the first actor that we've talked about today
He's in
that
Toy
isn't
Story.
dead. Him and Pacino.
Yeah. He's in Toy Story. He's the T-Rex.
Yeah. As soon as you said he was in Toy Story, I was like, I know who he plays. Yeah, that's... The casting in this movie is great. And again, not necessarily a ton of really big actors. I mean, there are a few, but not even really. I mean, I would say the biggest actor in this movie is an actress, Christian Wright.
It's gosh, I just forgot. It's Robin Wright.
Robin Wright, sorry.
Yeah, and she's in House of Cards, which just released.
Yeah, and that's like all that I know about her career.
That's like it. Yeah.
I mean, it's her in, the mid to late 80s. When did this movie come out?
In 87.
87, yeah. So kind of mid to late 80s. And then the next thing that we know about her career is her popping up in 2013.
Right.
So, I mean, there's not really anybody in this movie that's a huge actor or actress. And yet the movie, it's beloved. This is a movie that I will say, I won't say any age, but I would say from 13 up. I mean, this is absolutely appropriate movie. Can be seen, should be seen. And like you said earlier in your number 10 spot, one of the most quoted movies of all time.
Yeah, for sure.
So moving on to number 4, I've got Casino.
Okay.
And like I said before, I mentioned Goodfellas. Goodfellas is not on my list. And for the same reason that you brought up, really, it's like Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs. I use this comparison. Whichever one you see first, you're going to like that movie more.
Yep.
And you saw Reservoir Dogs first, and you like that movie more. And I do not understand that for the life of me, because I saw Pulp Fiction first.
Right.
And I can't put Reservoir Dogs even in the same sentence. I mean...
Right. Well, in terms of quality, they're not.
Well, in terms of quality, and in terms of the style, really.
Yeah.
I mean... Quentin Tarantino's style evolved so much in that little span of time. I mean, I think it was 91 to 93 was the year that they came out.
Yeah, I believe so. Something like that.
Yeah.
94 is when Pulp Fiction.
94. So over a 3-year span of time, his style evolved so much. And, they're completely different movies, but whichever one you see first, that's what you're going to think of when you think of Tarantino.
Right.
And it's kind of the same way. I mean, these movies aren't completely different. They're almost the same, Goodfellas and Casino.
Yeah, it's
basically the same
Goodfellas
cast.
Part 2.
It's basically the same cast. But it was my first...
Scorsese movie?
It might have been.
I think it probably was, because it was like my second Scorsese movie.
Yeah. I think this was my first Scorsese... My first exposure to
Casino?
Martin Scorsese.
You're talking about Casino, right?
Yes,
yeah.
before Goodfellas, before anything else. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And I personally like Casino more than Goodfellas also.
Right. So
yeah, it's just awesome movie.
Yeah, awesome movie, awesome acting, very slow going. And this is a movie that it suffers a bit in the watchability department.
Right.
But it's still, by movies that are this slow, it is more watchable than most, I'll say. I mean, I could watch it probably once a month.
But it is long.
It is long.
It is like 320.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. But great acting. Joe Pesci kills it here, I think more so than he does in Goodfellas. And this movie came out later, and I think that Scorsese was smart enough to realize, we've got something good here in Goodfellas. We want to milk it for all it's worth in Casino.
Right.
And they did. I mean, he gets a lot more screen time.
And he pulled it off, which
is
crazy because usually when they say, we need to just kind of do the same kind of movie, it flops bad.
Yeah. I mean, Casino, I think it's way underrated because it came out after Goodfellas. If you'd flip them, if Casino had come out before Goodfellas, I feel like Casino would be the beloved one and Goodfellas would get overlooked. And neither one of them deserve to be overlooked because they're both fantastic films.
Yeah.
But they're so similar that critics look at them and they're like, well, man, they're almost the same movie. We got to choose one. And Goodfellas consistently gets chosen. So repping Casino here when not a lot of people will.
Yep.
So,
and I completely agree.
So much love. And my number 3, here we're getting into my big 3, which I mentioned before. These are the 3 that they rotate sometimes, but they never change or have not changed in a long time. And
I believe your number 3 is my number 2. So we'll just go ahead and talk about it.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Godfather, Part 1.
Okay. Different movie then.
Yeah. Number 3 for me is The Godfather, first installment. I think, and here's where this is not the best movies list, it's our favorite movies list. Right. I think that this movie is probably very slightly, I mean, I've got to say that very explicitly. I feel like this movie is very slightly inferior to Godfather Part 2 in terms of quality.
Right, and we talked about this when we did our gangster talk.
Yeah, we've discussed this topic before. I think that Godfather 2 is the better movie, but if I am going to sit down and watch one, I'm going to watch number 1 every time almost.
And when we came in here today, you're like, let's not do any honorable mentions, but if I had to pick one, it would have been The Godfather.
Yeah, and I'm like I said, I'm surprised it isn't off your list, or it isn't on your list. I understand why it's not, but for me, this is probably, I mean, this is about as highbrow as movies get. I mean, this is a movie that it's not necessarily easy to watch, but you're better for watching it at the end.
Yep, and every time.
I mean, this is a movie where if you watch it and you don't like it, and I know exceptions to this. I know people that really did not like it that I respect their taste in movies, but generally speaking, this is kind of a litmus test for what your taste is in movies.
Right.
Whether you're just more of a popular movie kind of person or whether you really like the movies that the Academy likes, that Hollywood likes.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with liking the more popular movies. I mean, there are things where I don't even pretend to be extremely knowledgeable on or extremely a great connoisseur of them because I'm not. But movies I really like, that's something that I really get a lot of enjoyment out of. And Godfather for me is, I mean, there will be times, if you ask me 10 years down the road, assuming the next all-time great masterpiece doesn't come out between now and then,
right?
There will be times where you can ask me, hey, what's your number 1 favorite movie of all time? And I'll probably name this.
Right.
So, I mean, it rotates.
Yeah, and if I had to do a number 1 greatest movie ever made, like quality-wise, I would pick The Godfather.
I would too.
Because I think it bridges
I would pick Godfather 2.
Okay.
And Godfather 1 right after it.
Okay. Yeah, I would pick probably either one of the Godfathers because of it bridges up to this point in film still. It's still relevant.
Yeah.
And yet it was like
40 years ago.
And back in the day when it came out, it was considered, it wasn't like, like movies that come out now, you can't compare them to older movies.
Right.
But this one you can compare to old and new, and it's perfectly put right in the middle.
Yeah, it really bridges the difference between like De Niro and Pacino, whose careers were just getting started at this point.
Yep.
And the old guard, the guys like Bogey and James Stewart, guys like that. So yeah, Godfather Part 1, probably the best quality movie on this list. The only one that would really compete with it seriously is Apocalypse Now, on my list. But absolutely beloved. Right now, it's at my number 3 favorite movie list. Ask me again in a month, and it might be my number 1.
Right.
I mean, these number 3 are very shifty, but all three of them I love. And we'll get to 1 and 2 here after we hear yours.
Okay, my number 2 movie, and I realized that you had it crossed off of yours, so it was not in your top 10, is The Dark Knight.
Right.
The Dark Knight was my all-time favorite movie theater experience.
Yeah.
Because when I saw it, I didn't know what to expect at all.
Yeah.
And when he throws out that pencil magic trick, I can just remember like sitting there with my mouth open, just going, "Oh my goodness, what just happened?" Like it blew me away. And then Heath Ledger, who again we've already talked about today, it is his birthday, so I think that's relevant that we talk about The Dark Knight.
Absolutely.
He made this movie what it is.
Yeah.
And some people say that without Heath Ledger the movie wouldn't be good. I beg to differ.
Yeah.
He made it go from a great movie to a superb movie.
He made it go from either Dark Knight Rises or
Batman Begins.
Yeah, either Dark Knight Rises or Batman Begins to a step above those.
Exactly. He's the reason it's considered as one of the all-time great movies.
Yeah.
Whereas without him, it would be still considered the best comic book movie. And so I'm going to go ahead and put Heath Ledger to the side, or the Joker to the side real quick.
Okay.
And say that the movie by itself is way more complex than people want to admit.
Oh, absolutely.
Some people just don't want to say that it's the best comic book movie. There's no question it's the best comic book movie ever made.
I mean, I've heard legitimate arguments for both the first and third installments of the Dark Knight series. And, I mean, I get where they're coming from. If anything, I would be more inclined to take Dark Knight Rises because a lot of people disagree with me on this. I know you do.
Right.
A lot of people really prefer Dark Knight over it. I would probably give it Dark Knight over Dark Knight Rises by a nose in terms of my favorite movie. And it made my honorable mention list.
Right.
But Dark Knight Rises, and again, this is something where I've seen Dark Knight several times. I've seen Dark Knight Rises once in theaters.
Right.
So that may change for me. But Dark Knight Rises, I loved the imagery in it. And I think that's lost on a lot of people. I don't think it's lost on you. I think you just interpret it differently.
Yeah, there's just too many technical issues with that movie.
And see, And
I can't get over those.
And I mean, some of them are issues, but a lot of them, what you see as issues, I don't see as issues. I see it as
strengths in their own way.
Strengths in their own way, and something that it's more an avant-garde style of writing, of screenwriting.
Yeah. Well, getting back to The Dark Knight, because we don't have too much time. What Heath Ledger did do for this movie and for this character of the Joker completely defined villains.
Absolutely, it did.
It was
this took acting for villainy out of within the realm of PG-13, because there have always been your Hannibal Lecters in the R-rated zone. But for PG-13 movies, this took kind of the half comical, half sinister character, and made it to where, I mean, this guy's full-on psycho, and it's in a PG-13 movie, and that kind of made it to where that's the standard today.
Yeah, and I feel like every movie that's come out since The Dark Knight, any villain is compared to the Joker. Yeah. And they have to compare it and make it better than the Joker. And
absolutely.
He's completely set the way. And Christopher Nolan, great director. I'm going to say the best director right now directing. And
better than Scorsese or Tarantino?
Well, Scorsese...
Or Bigelow, for that matter?
They're so different. Scorsese, I think, is kind of coming to the end of his career.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's like 80-some years old.
Exactly. He's not quite that old. He's in his 70s. But
okay, 70s.
And then Tarantino is just Tarantino. You can't compare him to anybody.
Yeah,
he's
that's
so
fair.
weird. I'm going to say Nolan. We'll get to know for sure. His new movie, Interstellar, is coming out next year or 2 years. And they signed on
2 years, I think.
They signed on Matthew McConaughey for the lead. So
really,
that'll be interesting.
Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll see how that works. Okay, my number 2. This is another movie. This is probably the least quality movie on my list, and that's not to say it's poor quality, because I love this movie, and I've watched it so many times. I've had the chance to really look at it objectively, and more from a critic's perspective, less from a fan's perspective.
Right.
But really, it holds up even there. Not in the same way that like The Godfather or Apocalypse Now does.
Right.
But it's not a poorly done movie from a technical standpoint. But at the same time, it's not an all-time classic. But from what it means to me personally, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, number 2.
And I would say it is an all-time classic in the
the comedy world. John Hughes dominated the 1980s in terms of comedy.
And you know that I'm not the biggest Ferris Bueller's Day Off fan.
Right.
But I totally see where you're coming from. Like, if I would have seen the movie a long time ago, like, not last year, it would mean a lot more to me.
Yeah, and that's what happened to me. I mean, I saw this movie for the first time when I was like 11, or maybe younger than that. And I mean, this is a movie that I've seen so many times. Blew my mind when I first watched the unedited version of it, like where it wasn't on TV, because I was like, oh wow, there's actually cussing in this movie.
Right.
I was like, I did not see that coming. But this movie, probably more than any other movie or really anything else, I'm going to go out and say on a limb, more than anything else in my life, this movie has affected my sense of humor. And I mean, when I think of what's a hilarious movie, the first thing that I think of is Matthew Broderick's role as Ferris Bueller. And just the way that, I mean, he does so many things that you're not supposed to do in movies, and it makes the movie better, not worse.
Right.
Like breaking the fourth wall consistently. And when he does it, it doesn't get obnoxious. It just makes it hilarious, that scene. Right. You're like, oh my goodness, I love this. And I mean, the only other time I've ever seen that done as well, and I won't say better, but as well as it is done in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, is very recently on House of Cards.
Right, the TV show.
Kevin Spacey does it.
And it's completely done in a different way.
Oh, yeah. It's not used for a humorous tone at all. It adds a lot of drama and a lot of darkness to the series. But when Matthew Broderick does it in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, whenever he breaks the fourth wall, chances are you're going to be laughing your head off by the end of the scene.
For sure.
And like I said, this movie has influenced my life. Maybe not in terms of films and like what I look for in a film, because there's not really any other movies like this coming out. But in terms of my personality, I would say that this is probably the movie that has affected me the most in my life. Okay. And I've seen it probably 30 times.
Right.
Probably seen it more than any other movie. And yet I could pop it in today and watch it and be captivated for the whole movie.
Right.
So that's my number 2. Let's hear your number 1.
We're actually out of time, so we're going to go through these last 2 real quickly.
Yeah,
my number 1, if you don't know what it is already, I mentioned about every time we're on the show, is The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, which one?
I say all 3 when I do a list, because I cannot... because they were all filmed at the same time.
They were?
Yeah, they were. They were all filmed at the same time, which makes them so consistent.
Yeah.
Which is also a big plus. And so if I had to pick one, I'd pick the first one. Okay. Because the first one was the first PG-13 movie I ever saw, so there's that sentimental value. We read the book as a family. We sat down and watched it as a family. And it just, everything about it was built up. It's my dad's favorite movie, so it kind of has all that. And I've seen this movie. I cannot even count how many times I've seen it.
So this is kind of your version of Ferris Bueller's Day Off for me.
Oh, yeah. But all 3 of them, like I've seen them all 3. I can quote every line in the movie. Like, as it's playing, like, just the whole movie. And it gets really annoying now, watching with people, because we all start quoting it, and it's like, okay, we're not even watching the movie anymore. But Lord of the Rings, without a doubt. And in my opinion, some of the greatest, probably by far top 10 greatest movies since the 2000 mark.
Oh, easily.
And I would say Return of the King could probably be in the top 10, top 15 greatest movies ever.
The only one in that series that I would not put in the top 10 without hesitation
is Two Towers.
Right. Two Towers might even make top 25, but if you're doing a top 10 list, I think Return of the King and the initial Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship, those movies are both going to be in your top 10 list.
Yeah, and Return of the King, 11 for 11 in the Oscars. Fellowship, 13 nominations, and then the Two Towers had 5 nominations. So killed in the Academy Awards.
Right, and I've never heard that they were all done at the same time before. So that, it surprised me, but it explains a lot. If you think about it in terms of one continuum, the Two Towers is like the slow part in the middle.
It really is.
Like, the Fellowship is where things are kind of gearing up and trying to draw you into the story. And then everything comes to a climax in The Return of the King. But the Two Towers, it's like, with the exception of the battle scene at the very end, it's a pretty slow movie. And it's primarily just dealing with story and setting up for what's coming after.
Yeah, and the Return of the King, one of the greatest endings to a trilogy ever, if not the greatest.
I would put it right up there with
Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi.
Return of the Jedi. Yep.
Okay, give me your number 1.
My number 1, and this might surprise you. I don't know if it will or not. Pulp Fiction. by Quentin Tarantino.
A little surprising that it's your number one.
Well, like I said, this movie, along with Ferris Bueller and the first Godfather movie, they are kind of moving parts. I mean, this could be my number 3 favorite movie on a different given time.
Right.
But I have so much respect for the way that Quentin Tarantino has changed the movie industry.
Oh, for sure.
You've talked about Scorsese being your favorite director. My favorite director is probably Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
And it's because there's nobody else like him, and that's not a bad thing.
He really likes to, if this is the right word, he likes to stick it to the man. And the man being the film industry. He likes to do it, hey, this is my way, I'm making a film. I'm not going to do it your way.
Right.
And I love it, because his films reflect that.
Absolutely. His movies, more than any other directors, really show his personality, I feel like. I mean, when I watch his movies, I'm like, I can see exactly what he's thinking on this, writing the screenplay, and I think that all of his movies he's done, he wrote. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't think of an exception.
Yeah, he writes all his stuff.
Yeah.
Directs it all.
I mean, he's a perfectionist. He's only released a few movies, and every single movie, I mean, the one that probably is panned more than any other is Jackie Brown in terms of full-length movies.
Right.
And I watched that recently, like a month ago, and I was like, this is not a bad movie. De Niro's in it.
Because it's against Pulp Fiction.
Well, yeah.
That's why it gets...
Yeah, I mean, it gets put up against Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs, which, again, I'm not as big a fan of. But quality-wise, he is basically right out of film school at this point. So, I mean, it's not going to be the same quality as a multi-million-dollar budget movie.
Right.
But the direction and the way that he, worked that movie and the way that he cast it, really, bringing in Harvey Keitel, bringing in Tim Roth, I mean, all of the characters are well cast. Everyone brings something to the table, which that's a rarity.
And
in
Pulp
film,
Fiction is what boosted Samuel L. Jackson's career again too.
Kind of revitalized him as an actor.
Yeah.
And very few movies. I'm fixing to wrap up here because I know we're over time. Very few movies do you watch the whole movie and every character or every main character, like the ones that would get top billing, every single one of them adds something significant to the feel of the movie.
Right.
But in Tarantino's movies, that's the case every single time. And that's so rare, and it is really, I mean, if you want an example of that recently, I would say Django Unchained. We were talking about Christoph Waltz won the best Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. I don't even think he should have won. I think it should have been Leo DiCaprio.
Yeah, and I do too.
But, I mean, I'm not going to argue with Christoph Waltz winning. And he adds to the movie greatly. Every character in that movie. I mean, Samuel L. Jackson is outstanding in the movie in his own way. I mean, you kind of know Samuel L. Jackson's characters, what he's going to be from this set out. But he's outstanding. Jamie Foxx just kills it. I was really surprised at how well he brought it in that movie. And, I mean, you take all the things that are good about that, maybe slightly down on the violence a bit.
Right.
And that's Pulp Fiction, only Pulp Fiction 10 times more so.
Right.
I mean, Pulp Fiction, if anyone came to me and said, this guy Quentin Tarantino, what's he about as a director? Yep. I would put in Pulp Fiction.
And say, this is literally Tarantino.
Yeah. And this movie, I said that Ferris Bueller probably has affected my sense of humor and a lot of my personality more so than any other movie. Pulp Fiction has probably affected the way that I view movie criticism more than any other movie. So this movie is to me kind of what Taxi Driver is to you.
Okay.
And for that, it gets my number one spot. I'm not saying it's the best movie on this list. Probably not.
It's up there.
It's definitely up there. And I would say if I was doing quality, looking through my list, it would be top 3 still.
Right, for sure.
But this movie, more than any other movie, has really just wowed me in terms of what can really be done when you have a creative writer, a creative director, and good acting. So that brings us to the end of the list. Do you want to sign us off?
Tyler's favorite movie is Pulp Fiction. Favorite movie is Pulp Fiction.
Number one favorite Pulp Fiction
is The Lord of the Rings. All 3 of them. I can't pick one. If I had to pick one, it'd be the first one. But you've been listening to The Thecrackednation on KCC Eagle Broadcasting. We thank you so much for listening. Tuesday, we will bring you another show from 3 to 4. We don't know what our topic will be yet. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Thecrackednation, and we will be posting things about what we're going to talk about then on there. So until Tuesday, have a good time.